Hello everyone, and welcome to SUNUP. I'm Lyndall Stout. With cattle feeding season in full swing, today we want to revisit a SUNUP segment on hay and a technique you may want to try to improve the quality of your hay. We begin with our beef cattle extension specialist, Dave Lallman.
We're going to take some low quality forage and we're going to turn it into some pretty nice quality prairie hay. And the process we're using is called ammoniation, where we just use anhydrous ammonia, inject it into a stack that's covered and sealed, and it changes the chemical profile to the point that the really low quality material, if you're a cow, turns into very good quality hay.
Okay, why don't you walk us through the process, kind of what the steps are and kind of what the recipe is per se.
Sure. There's a fact sheet which we can link, of course, to the SUNUP website that producers can go to see the details. But essentially, the big picture is that we're going to stack the hay in a format or form that will fit underneath a 40-foot by 100-foot sheet of black plastic. And we're using 6 mil plastic, which just means the heaviest black plastic that you can buy. It needs to be heavy so that we don't poke a lot of holes in it. And then once we cover it, we're sealing it around the edge with some fine rock here today. That will create kind of a gas-proof barrier, and so we'll trap the anhydrous ammonia underneath that plastic tent, if you will. And once the anhydrous has been exposed to the hay for, in warm weather about 2 weeks, and cool weather about a month, you wind up with a really nice quality product.
Okay, what is the injection process involved? What do you need for that step?
The injection is the easiest part of the whole thing, and what we did was we ordered an anhydrous tank that had the amount of anhydrous ammonia that we calculated we would need for this stack of hay. We have 69 round bales of hay under this stack, and they weigh about 1,450 pounds each, so that they're pretty heavy bales. But we calculated that we wanted to inject about 2.5% of the weight of the hay anhydrous, and so we just ordered a tank with that exact amount of anhydrous in, so we didn't have to worry about when to shut the tank off. We'll just pull the tank up here to the stack, poke the hose underneath it, crack the valve open, seal around the hose again with the fine gravel or rock, and then let it slowly work its way into the stack of hay.
Dave, let's go take a look at a bale that's already been ammoniated, and we can talk about the benefits then for the cattle.
Okay.
Dave, tell me what we have here.
This is a bale of wheat straw that has been ammoniated prior to this by a producer down around the Guthrie area. He ammoniated this about a month ago, and so it went from the kind of the light tan or khaki wheat straw color to more of a caramel color, and that's common with ammoniation. Most hay types are going to turn a darker color, and it's because a chemical reaction occurs in the fiber portion of the hay, and actually if you feel the texture, it's much softer after the ammoniation process has taken place.
So does that mean it's richer and more nutrients then?
It is. The crude protein content of this hay is about a little over 9%. Before we ammoniated it, it was just a touch under 4%. And so it would have doubled the crude protein concentration, which of course would reduce your need for expensive protein supplementation this winter for the cow herd. The other thing that happened is that, and has been documented time and time again through the research that's been done on ammoniation, is that the digestibility increased in this particular batch of hay from about 47% up to 52, which is a very substantial increase in energy for the cow. The last thing I'll tell you about ammoniation, Lyndall, is that it is very palatable. You and I can smell the ammonia coming off of this bale of hay right now. If you open the stack and let it air out for maybe a day or two before you feed it, it's generally not a problem. People are, concerned about that, but the cows don't seem to mind at all. It's very, very palatable to them.
Okay. And then you mentioned some of the benefits, but how does that translate then to benefits for the herd?
The bottom line is you should expect improved animal performance, or you could reduce the amount of hay that you needed to feed, because every bit that they consume, they're actually mining more nutrients from it had you not ammoniated it.
You kind of looked at the cost benefits and what this means with ammoniated hay versus supplements.
If you look at a concentrate supplement that's generally going to provide protein and energy, just from a general standpoint, the value of ammoniation in the calculations that we did with this particular hay meant that we could cut back on winter supplement, the concentrate supplement, by about half of what we would have had to fed with the hay, not being ammoniated.
So that really adds up after a winter.
It's a big savings, yes.
Okay, well, we appreciate the demonstration and the information today.
You bet. Welcome. Thank you for coming out.
Okay, and for more information and a link to that fact sheet that Dave mentioned, just go to our website, sunup.okstate.edu.
Over the past few weeks, we've been talking with Kim about how the dollar's been on the move. And Kim, let's say that I'm France and I bought $100 worth of wheat back in late June, early July. What would that $100 worth of wheat be worth now?
Well, let's say the euro is equal to the dollar back in June and July, and so you bought 100 euros worth of wheat.
Right.
If France was buying that same amount of wheat today, that wheat would cost them about $119. If you look at the index of the US dollar to other major currencies over that time period, it's went from about an 80 to about a 94.7. That's about an 18.4% increase in the value of the dollar. Now, if you convert that to bushels of wheat, that's about an additional $1.10 per bushel for the wheat on that market.
So taking that information, how high can the price of the dollar go?
Well, if you look at what's happened to the dollar over the last 15 years or so, you go back in from say February of 2000 to January of 2003, that index of the dollar went up to over 120 points. Now that's another 28% increase in the value of the dollar, or in other words, it's about another $1.75 per bushel on wheat. Now the dollar likes to, stay in the 80 to around the 80 to 95 range, somewhere in there. It looks like it may go up into the 95 to 105. Rarely does it go against over 105 points. So I think we could pick up maybe another 10 or 15 points on the dollar, or it may just waller around in this range for a while.
Okay, speaking of things that have not been wallering around, it's been the price of wheat. It's been on the move a little bit, slightly.
Yeah, if you go back to the first of the month, we were around $6 in Oklahoma. We're down around $5.10 now, give or take 10 cents in the area. You look at the March contract, it's had support at $5.60. It got down to $5.33. You look at the July contract, the harvest contract that everybody's watching, it had support at $5.55. It's got down to slightly below that. It doesn't have support until we get down to $5.15. We're on a hard, sharp downtrend. It's just no telling how low it could go, but it's a long time between now and harvest. That's the good news.
I was going to say, we're entering February. Harvest is a long time away. There's still some area for variability in there too.
There's a lot of time to go, but there's a lot of things going in the markets. You got the foreign markets, you got the weather, you got the dollar, you got the funds. The thing to remember, it's not what goes on into Oklahoma, Texas, or Kansas. It's what's happening around the world that impacts our price now.
And that's why we come to you, Kim Anderson. Kim Anderson, Grain Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
As this calving season begins, wouldn't it be great if we could predict accurately when every heifer is going to calve? Well, unfortunately, we just can't do that. But there are some signs that we can look for to tell us that calving time is coming up, it's impending. And there are some that I think are a little bit more accurate, a little more reliable than others. Some of those that we may look at and see early on, of course, are the filling of the udder, the beginning of the strutting of the teats, and quite frankly, those may begin as much as 2 to 3 weeks ahead of calving time, but they give us an indication that calving season is certainly approaching. You may see the actual release of the cervical plug, and that would just be a thick mucus that's hanging from the tail end of the cow or the heifer. And again, this may happen 10 to 14 days or more prior to calving, so it's not a real good tip as well. The one that I would really put my most stock into in terms of a reliable sign that calving is imminent is the relaxation of pelvic ligaments. Now, how are we going to tell that? Well, if we're very observant and watch these cattle closely before the calving season actually begins, and then can see the differences as that change due to the hormone changes in the cow or the heifer near calving, of the relaxation of those pelvic areas, you'll begin to see some indentation, some sinking, if you will, around the tail head of that cow or particularly a heifer that you're watching pretty closely. When you begin to see that situation, that's a pretty good indication that stage 1 of parturition is about to take place, and we probably need to get that heifer up into our calving area so that we can watch her pretty closely over the next 24 hours. Again, this is all due to some very, very big hormonal changes that's taking place in this cow or the heifer. Some of them will show behavioral signs that are different from others, but again, those are not real reliable. Watch for that relaxation of the pelvic ligaments, and I think it'll do a real good job of helping you get the right heifer up close to the headquarters with a little better accuracy than some of these other signs. Hey, we look forward to visiting with you again next week on SUNUP's Cow-Calf Corner.
We want to continue our discussion now with our ag economist, Larry Sanders. And Larry, let's talk about the drop in oil prices we've seen the last couple of months and what it's meant for Oklahoma. What's the overall picture?
Sure, it's been a remarkable story. We've had oil prices over $100 a barrel just a few months ago, and just recently we went below $50 a barrel. That has to be a major change for key players in the chain of oil and gas. Just real quickly, what seems to have caused it is overproduction. We've got too much in the market, and that's just because we've gotten very successful at finding it and getting it out of the ground, oil and natural gas, and not just here in the United States, but around the world. And Saudi Arabia has decided that they're going to see how many people they can drive out of the market now, and they can afford to do that. So we're gonna watch prices wallow around at this price, maybe even go a little bit lower for a while before they start ticking up again.
How long do you think this trend is going to last, and when do you think we might see a bit of a recovery?
Well, again, I think Saudi Arabia is the key. It only costs them $4 or $5 a barrel to get oil out of the ground, and that's probably the cheapest cost of production in the world, and they've got a large stockpile of it. And so they have been very concerned, selfishly for them, over the last year or two to see Russia come into the market, and Russia's a relatively high-cost producer, and so they think they can push them out of the market fairly soon. The United States, we've been so successful with hydraulic fracturing, and in Oklahoma, one of the leaders in that. It's been a remarkable story of finding a way to get that stuff out of the ground, but it's brought millions and millions of barrels of oil onto the market, and Saudi Arabia would be tickled to death if they could drive the price down enough that it drives some of our independents out of business and shuts some of those down for a while, so that we can begin to see a reduction in the excess supply, and then they would start it. So we're probably going to see it for at least 3 to 6 months, low prices. If that drives some of those people out of the market, if demand starts coming back a little stronger, then maybe toward the end of the year we'll see prices start coming up again. But Saudi Arabia is prepared to wait it out. So
some strategy there for sure.
see.
In terms of the impact on Oklahoma, especially agriculture, what's your take?
Well, you know, agriculture, oil and gas is a two-edged sword for agriculture. They are consumers, of course, so, you know, oil and gas are inputs into the production process. More for cotton producers, perhaps, and maybe a little less for wheat and corn producers, depending on where you mark the boundaries of it. But far as their production processes, I don't think very many of them are going to go run out and buy new combines because of the lower price of fuel. If it stays for a year or so this way, then they may begin to think about things like that. Fertilizer, they may bank a little more fertilizer in case they think they need it later in the season. It's going to be easy for them to fill the tank up and make a few more sweeps over the field if they think they need to. So we may not see as much minimum tillage this year as we have in previous years. So it'll be a very mixed story for farmers and ranchers.
Well, Larry, we certainly appreciate your time and perspective.
I'm Al Sutherland with your Mesonet weather report. Setting record heat in January makes for a really pleasant afternoon, but it does add stress to winter crops. A map of the combined water loss from plants and soil for Tuesday, January 27th, gives us an idea of how much moisture can be lost. This map shows evapotranspiration water losses in inches. The brown areas have an estimated water loss of up to 1/1800ths, just under 2/10. That's a lot of water in inches for a single winter day. The yellow areas lost 1/10 of an inch or more of water. The green areas' water losses were below 1/10 of an inch. The high air temperatures on Tuesday afternoon were record-setting for January 27th. Alva hit 84 degrees. Most of the state, the orange areas, had afternoon highs in the upper 70s. The green corner in the northeast was the only place in the state with air temperatures below 70 degrees. Wednesday, January 28th was another heat wave day. Even more Mesonet sites had air temperature maximums reach 80 or higher. 25 sites in all. Only 3 Mesonet sites had highs below 70 degrees. The amount of plant available water in the top 16 inches of soil at the end of Tuesday varied from good levels across eastern Oklahoma to low levels in the west. A number of locations on the east side of the state had 4 inches or more of plant available water. In the western and central parts of the state, some Mesonet sites reported good soil moisture with more than 4 inches, while neighboring Mesonet sites were much drier, some closer to 2 inches, and a few dry sites were close to only 1 inch of moisture. That mixed bag of moisture was emphasized on a map of the percent of soil moisture from the surface down to 16 inches. The dark green areas were above 90%. The yellow areas had values in the 40 to 60% range. The dry brown areas hovered near 20%. When we consider how little rain has fallen from late December through Wednesday, January 28th, it is a wonder we aren't drier. Our 30-day rainfall map shows a small band in the southeast that has received 4 inches or more of rain. The dark green areas have received close to 3 inches. That trailed down to just over 1 inch in the light green areas. The blue areas had less than 1 inch, with half of the Mesonet sites in the blue reporting a 1/2 inch or less over 30 days. Warm days move wheat closer to the first hollow stem stage. Through Tuesday, only early first hollow stem varieties near Newport were mature enough to need checking. Looking ahead to February 4th, wheat fields near the Red River in central and eastern Oklahoma need to be checked. Going out 2 weeks, those areas where wheat needs to be checked expand dramatically. Are you wondering what first hollow stem group your wheat varieties fall into? There is an online list that you can refer to. Thanks for joining us for this edition of the Mesonet Weather Report.
It's time now to talk horses, and joining us now is Chris Heine, our new equine extension specialist. And Chris, welcome to OSU.
Well, thank you very much.
This time of year is probably a good time for horse owners to do a little planning. And in terms of breeding season, what kind of advice do you have for them?
Well, one is first to decide whether or not it's a good idea to breed your mare. A lot of owners fail to realize all the costs that may actually be involved when choosing to breed their mare. So it's not only just the stud fee, but all of the veterinary visits you may have if you're going to ship semen, the cost of transport if the mare needs to go to the stallion, mare care. So there's a variety of charges a lot of people don't consider when they're making that decision about making a new baby.
And sometimes it may be better to just buy a horse, right?
Oftentimes it's actually better and easier just to buy a horse.
In terms of facilities, there's also some things to consider when you're planning.
Sure, if you're gonna raise a foal, you have to have a safe environment for a foal. So people tend to forget that little horses can escape out of places. They're also a little bit more destructive or can get into things a little bit more than an adult horse. So you really need to look at your property and decide if it's a good idea or not.
Now, in terms of foaling, which is right around the corner, what kind of advice do you have for horse owners?
Most mares will foal out without a problem. 90% of foalings proceed normally without any need for human intervention. But a lot of people get really excited about that baby being born and want to get in there and get involved and help it stand up and help it nurse, when that may not be the best thing to do. Really, it's best to watch to see if there's any problems and only intervene if you actually need to.
Your natural tendency is to want to help, but how do you know when something might be wrong? What are some of the signs, and what kind of preparation can you do in advance?
Sure. Well, if you're watching a mare foal, you're attending her foaling, and she's been straining for about 10 minutes without any progress. So you don't see any further pushing out of the feet of the foal or of the muzzle, then that may be a time to at least check to see if the foal is actually positioned correctly. Otherwise, you should just kind of step back and let nature take its course.
At what point do you think you need to call the veterinarian?
If you've examined the mare and you found that maybe the foal isn't positioned correctly, that's certainly a time to call your vet if you're not an experienced person at foaling out mares and feel comfortable with repositioning a foal. So most of the time I would encourage people to work very closely with their veterinarian and have these discussions ahead of time. What are the type of things you can handle on your own, and when should you get them there as soon as possible?
But like you said, most of the time nature's going to take its course, as it does.
And it's a wonderful experience. I'd encourage people, if you can, be involved to watch it. But again, watch it from afar. You don't need to be that close.
And then those babies walk pretty quickly.
Yes, they do. They'll be on their feet pretty soon. Again, you don't need to help them. Babies have been getting up on their own for a long time. It's very entertaining to watch as they struggle to get up. But again, just let them do it.
This spring, you're putting together a workshop for horse owners. Tell us about that.
Yeah, March 7th, so the first Saturday in March, we're going to have a joint effort between the Animal Science Department and the College of Veterinary Medicine, putting together a workshop for small horse owners. So we're going to have topics related to parasite control, pasture management, choosing the correct fences for your horses that are safe and economical, and some other hands-on activities and vendors out here at the arena.
Okay, sounds like a great workshop. Chris, thank you very much, and we'll see you again soon. And for a link to the website that Chris mentioned, just go to sunup.okstate.edu.
Well, we don't have to tell you that cattle prices have been all over the place the past couple weeks, but we go to the expert here. Daryl, what gives on the cattle markets?
You know, we've seen a lot of factors affecting the market. We're in the new year. We're still really trying to get a sense of the tone of this market. There's still some post-holiday things in terms of pipeline movements of beef and so on. But I think the biggest factor right now is a lot of external forces that are impacting the markets, primarily through the futures markets. So low energy prices, a stronger dollar, you know, even the disruptions in the West Coast ports, all of those things kind of play back into the futures market, and it's created a lot of selling pressure pressure there, and that's spilled over into the cash markets with some, some bearishness, and we have seen these prices drop, at least here in the short term, in the past couple of weeks.
Okay, we bring it back to Oklahoma. We haven't had much rain lately, and cattle are out on wheat right now. Are we getting into a bad position?
You know, we are getting drier. We have definitely gone backwards. The drought monitor map most recently showed a significant increase in marginal drought conditions. We've had areas that, of course, that have been in severe drought continuously. They haven't really expanded that much, although they are slowly expanding, but the rest of the state that was in better shape has gone backwards. And so I think it's something to keep an eye on from a pasture and hay production standpoint. We're a couple of months away from the new growing season, but if we get into that and we're still dry, that's going to be a very big deal. The USDA recently released some data that shows that we actually have pretty good hay stocks. We had a good forage year last year, so we've got some forage reserves to work with, but I think producers want to be careful about sort of planning ahead on how they might need to use those if we have any delays in new forage production this spring.
So we're kind of at an advantage over, say, 2 or 3 years ago whenever we were almost in the same situation.
That's right. I mean, we have the potential here. We have to keep an eye on it. We don't know whether we're going to go back into drought. At least for a short period of time, we do have some additional forage reserves. Winter wheat pastures have been pretty good this year. We have more cattle out on wheat than we've had in recent years, but the wheat is under stress right now, and it's running out fast, frankly. And so, again, we're going to see those forage supplies change pretty dramatically here. Producers need to make plans to what they're going to do with these cattle and get them off of the wheat here right away.
Okay, let's paint the picture for the Oklahoma cattle producer. What's it look like?
Well, again, I don't think the market fundamentals have changed, and so I think producers need to continue on with their plans. We're still looking at more herd expansion as we go forward. Again, those market fundamentals are there. What we've learned recently is that we can have this short-term volatility in the market, and that's one of the factors we have to be prepared to deal with. From a forage standpoint, I think we have to sort of plan ahead for worst case scenarios, hope that doesn't happen, and be prepared to take advantage of it if in fact we have better than average conditions.
That's one thing Oklahomans are good at, preparing for the bad and praying for the best, right?
There you go.
Okay, Daryl Peel, Livestock Marketing Specialist here at Oklahoma State University.
And that'll do it for us this week. Remember, you can find us anytime online at sunup.okstate.edu, and also follow us on YouTube and our social media. I'm Lyndall Stout. Have a great week, and we'll see you next time at SUNUP.